have to connect back to our lives. And what better way than to connect with our breath, which keeps us alive?
Today's guest is Elaine Glass. She's a healer, holistic coach, and author of the new, widely acclaimed book, Get Quiet. Elaine helps people unlock their truest selves, find greater purpose, peace, and self-empowerment.
The people that were on the most medications, the people that were the most anxious, the most depressed, the most lost, were those people that hadn't said yes to their calling. It's not complicated. Spirituality is just the ability to pay attention and wake up to the health of your soul. It's miraculous. It's just what makes life just amazing.
All right, Elaine, welcome officially to the Fit Father and Fit Mother Project podcast. We are so happy to have you here.
This is awesome to be here. I'm so excited to be here with you.
And I'm really happy for you. I'm speaking now as your friend and someone we both, for those who don't know, we both live in Arizona. And now you're the author of this new book, Get Quiet, 7 Simple Paths to the Truth of Who You Are. And we're going to have a spiritual discussion here. And I want to frame that for the audience because you're someone who has a lot of depth in this area, and you've gone through a very powerful process of awakening and healing yourself. And you've guided so many people through a process of what you call getting quiet and tapping into your inner knowing and connecting to God. So I just want to share that in the beginning of this conversation. This is going to get deep. This is going to get spiritual. So buckle up, listeners. And if this is not your cup of tea and you're more interested in just the standard fitness stuff, then this might not be the conversation for you. But maybe if you feel some resistance, it might just be the perfect conversation for you. And I have a question to kick this off with you, Elaine. But first, I want to read a quote from the beginning of your book because I think it's really amazing. It's a quote from Robert Adams. You say that the only way you'll ever awaken is through silence, not through analyzation of facts, not by sorting out good or bad, but through simple silence, letting go of all thoughts, all the hurts, all the dogmas and concepts, letting go of these things daily. So my first question for you, Elaine, is what does it mean to get quiet, and why do we need it more now than ever?
Get quiet means to let go of everything that we carry that weighs us down in life. The emotions, the trauma, the holding of emotions of others, of not knowing our soul's purpose and why we're here. We hold all of this stress. And getting quiet is a path to releasing all of that so that you feel light and you are really ultimately creating the lightness of being. And in that state of being in the lightness of your being, that's how you connect to yourself and that's how you connect to God.
That's a good succinct answer. And so how does someone know if they're in a state right now where they're not quiet?
They don't feel good in their bodies. They're feeling sluggish, fatigued, depressed, anxious, overweight. Their environments are cluttered. They've got junk in their cabinets, old clothes in the closets. They've got relationships that are not feeling good. They're not supportive. And they might be in a relationship, in a romantic relationship that's not honoring them.
So if someone feels any degree of this in any aspect, their environment, their feeling of self-love, self-worth, their relationships, their physical health, how do we start to get more quiet in those areas? What is the path that you've been leading people down? And I know there's intricacy to it, but insofar as we can have a starting point in this discussion for people to understand the process, that would be nice. And I guess as we share that, it would also be really nice for all of us listening to know about your path specifically and your story of how you got quiet. So however you want to approach that.
The answer to your question first is where do we start? And we start with awakening to the fact that our lives are spiraling out of control. So that's the first step, is the acknowledgement, is to wake up and to pay attention. In my life, I fell asleep at the wheel, so to speak, and the car crashed. And what that looked like for me was I had all the luxuries of living in a beautiful home, married, two beautiful children, a stay-at-home mom, had all the freedom that I could possibly have to raise my children in a great environment, but I was miserable. I was not being honored. I felt like a nanny in my own home so many times. And I made the difficult decision to walk away from that relationship with two small children. And so that was my car wreck, because I looked away, I stopped paying attention, and now I found myself a single mother, full-time working. We lived in a tiny little house, and that's where I started. And that's where I knew I have to wake up, because my inspiration at the time, because I didn't love myself fully, was that if I can't love myself right now, at least love my children enough to be the healthiest mother I can be, mind, body, and soul. And that's where my journey started, with that awakening, with that starting point, and that intention. Because everything you want to change starts with an intention.
So if someone's at a point right now where they feel like they're either at a crossroads or there's multiple areas of their lives that they feel like aren't in absolute alignment, where does someone start to unravel? Do they focus on one thing first? Do they focus on a particular practice? Are they taking inventory of something? Like, it can feel like a lot, especially if you're in a situation like you were in, where there's major life transitions. Where's someone going to get some traction in this process?
I know this sounds really simple, and I wish I had known this 15 years ago, but it would be to connect with my breath. I stopped breathing almost. It was hard to breathe. When you're trying to hold everything together, afraid that everything's going to fall apart if you just let go a little bit, it's frightening. My life was so filled with uncertainties, financial uncertainties. How are my kids going to turn out after divorce? Like, it was horrible. It was a horrible time. And now I've learned, even in difficult moments now, I always start with connecting to just breathing. And it's that simple, because we have to connect back to our lives. And what better way than to connect with our breath, which keeps us alive? So this is a very simple process. Spirituality is not a big subject in terms of, it's not complicated. Spirituality is just the ability to pay attention and wake up to the health of your soul and what your soul needs. I believe that we are souls having a human experience, but we have forgotten that. And so we're only really operating from this human place, totally asleep at the fact that we have something so much greater that we're connected to. And it's in this disconnection that I found myself, and that I found many other people that I've worked with. And that's why I started to write this book, Get Quiet.
In the book, you talk about this idea of the labyrinth. It's this model of our lives that we feel like we're navigating. Can you speak into this model of the labyrinth so that people who haven't not yet read your book can understand and can maybe locate themselves on the path?
Absolutely. So I came across this retreat center here in Paradise Valley, Arizona, and I needed quiet. I needed the answers that I couldn't hear in my fearful, noisy state. So I went to this retreat center. I was guided there by someone that told me about it. And in the back of the retreat center, it was so quiet. I could hear the birds chirping. I could hear the gravel crunching under my feet. And it was like, I could like feel myself again. And in the back of that retreat center was a labyrinth. And I'd heard about labyrinths, but I'd never walked a labyrinth. And it's really a metaphor to going toward the center of ourselves, connecting to our inner self, or also a path to connect to God. So it's only one way in and one way out, but it's really some circular paths. It only takes maybe, 10, 15 minutes to walk in and walk out in total. And I started to walk in circles in the desert. And Anthony, I thought I was going crazy. What am I doing walking in circles but I was desperate for answers. I was desperate to hear my soul's voice. I had stopped talking and having conversations with God. And that was my biggest mistake. And so in the labyrinth, I was clearly able to hear in a loving and subtle voice, my soul's voice guiding me, and God and angels and guides and everything else in the unseen that we maybe don't know about yet, or if we do, we don't trust it. So this was a lot of my beginnings of getting quiet, was just tuning in a quiet atmosphere and in nature, because we are nature. So when we're wanting to come back alive, when we're wanting to come back online, so to speak, from a dark place, we've got to connect to our breath, we've got to connect to quiet, and we have to connect to nature.
In people's modern lives right now, what are some of the factors that are keeping people disconnected? I'm thinking about busy parents in our communities who are listening to this, who maybe feel some intuition that there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. What's the flow of life right now in our current culture that has led to so many people feeling disconnected? What are some of the obstacles?
Well, of course, and again, this is not a sexy topic. Everybody is hearing these days, connect to nature, go for a walk, connect with your breath. This is on repeat in society. And yet people are still wanting to be distracted on their phones, on social media, on news feed. And all of that is putting into our body, into every cell of our body, and informing our bodies of fear and negativity. And unfortunately, fear and negativity sell. What I'm talking about does not sell to the masses, but there's going to be and are so many people speaking up like you and me that it's going to penetrate through to the masses. It eventually will, and I have faith that it will, because it already is. But I would say that besides the normal distractions that we have in our life, I think for parents that I have seen in my experience is this over-identification through our children and what that does for them. It puts so much stress on them to perform, to be a certain way, to have a certain personality, to have certain interests. And so that is a distraction where we're putting ourselves onto our children instead of owning who we are, taking care of our stuff that we need to heal or we need to transform, and working on ourselves. That, I feel, for parents is the biggest distraction.
That's powerful. And I want to unpack that a little bit more so that I'm clear and that our listeners really understand this. What you're saying there is that one of the distractions and obstacles is that parents are over-identifying as parents or as this role that they're playing for their kids, and at the expense of them really looking inward and doing some of the deep inner work. Was that what you were saying?
Exactly. And I love the Kahlil Gibran quote that says, children are not of us. They come through us, but they are not of us. And you're familiar with that quote. That's one of my
favorite passages of all time. I got that I received it as a poem when my daughter was born. Yeah.
It's powerful. And when you can live that way, you're a whole different parent, and that child will be raised with knowing who they are and not who you want them to be.
And you even said the word will be raised, which is, I think, powerful phraseology. It's like the process of the raising is a happening versus we are doing it or controlling it tightly. And it seems like that's a theme that we're arriving at here. There's a letting go to get quiet.
The very first day I got to the Labyrinth, I heard the word very clearly, as if someone was standing right next to me, and the word was surrender. And I was like, surrender? If I surrender, my whole life is going to fall apart. Like, I'm just trying to control everything and keep it all together as a single mom living paycheck to paycheck. But it came in so clearly that I followed it and I trusted it. It kind of scared me though, because I actually didn't go back to that labyrinth for a month later, because I was like, whatever's happening over here, there's some big stuff going on. And I'm gonna be shifting some things here, and I've got to be ready. I went back the 4 weeks later, got another important message, which was, you're not alone. I'm here with you. And I started singing the Michael Jackson song of the same lyrics. And you know, Anthony, I went back to my car that day and that song was playing on the radio.
That's beautiful.
And I've walked that labyrinth for 15 years. It's right across the street from my house. And it has guided me in ways that have brought me to, well, being here with you, having a whole complete new life, because I tuned in and got quiet and listened to the messages and trusted them and had faith.
I mean, that I really want to dive into that a little bit more, this dimension of trust and faith and how that relates to getting quiet. I mean, it seems like it's a process that develops as we let go more and surrender. And I think a lot of the great religious texts from all different backgrounds have something to the effect of that we walk by faith and not by sight, and that we are able to take the leap in this direction that we have this inner calling for, even if we don't know the how steps. How did you cultivate that trust and faith? And maybe even just talk about how those virtues show up on the spiritual path.
I was blessed to have a foundation as a child, a very, very solid foundation in faith in God. And I was also had the freedom to create it, whatever that looked like for myself, without any dogma, without any rules. So I felt a lot of freedom to create my own spiritual practice. And so I feel blessed by that. And I needed that. Like, I needed that because I had lost it in the divorce and all the crazy, chaotic years. But then I had to find my way back to it. And if you have to find your way back to it, at least you have this light to kind of shine back and reflect and remember how that felt. But if you have not had that foundation of faith, it can feel like you're jumping off a cliff and you don't know where you're going to land. And it did feel that way for me. But the minute that you make the intention, going back to the word intention, make the intention that, okay, my plan hasn't been working all that well. I believe that God has a bigger plan for me. And let's just try this. Let's just try it out. Let's start in prayer. Let's start getting quiet and tuning in to see if we hear something that's different than the fear of what's been piping into our lives up until now. Because it truly is just all fear. Like I said, fear selves. And so you don't want to be manipulated by that. We've got to wake up to this beautiful, beautiful life, this magical life. And it's so hard to do right now. And getting quiet, I believe, helps us get healthy in a sick world. Mm-hmm. Because what is health? Health is knowing our soul's mission. And if there's a premise here at all for me, it is the fact that I want to honor this one God-given life to the highest level. And what that means for me is to know my soul's purpose and my soul's calling. And the only way we can connect to that is through quiet.
You ask a series of powerful questions in the book. One of those questions, an age-old one in spiritual traditions, is, who am I? Can you speak about the significance of that question as it relates to the quiet path? And from there, I would like to expand this into looking at a little bit more about our identities, who we believe we are versus who we may actually be, what we may actually be. So start please with the significance of the who am I question and how that showed up for you and certainly in this book.
The who am I is, are you wearing a mask or are you not wearing a mask? And it's the metaphor of, I know that when I was married and living this so-called great life that everyone looking inward would have said, she's got the perfect life. I would walk outside and put this mask on and it fit perfectly and it worked perfectly. And I could have gotten an Oscar, Anthony, based upon what this mask, did for me. But it wasn't me. And so when I would go back inside my big home and cry myself to sleep, it's in those moments of stress and struggle and suffering that you ask that age-old question, who am I? Who am I really? And how do I get to that answer? And we're always in search of that answer. We're always in search of that inquiry. And it's a beautiful inquiry. And again, that's why I wrote Get Quiet, because I really do feel like the paths that I have laid out and the tools in the book do bring you to the point of knowing who you are and the truth of who you are. And that you can take that mask off and wow, now you're living in real health.
And what if someone's at a point right now in their life where they're in a family structure, a dynamic that they've created through many years of construction, some of it conscious, some of it unconscious, and they're starting to feel this stir for deeper, this stir for deepening their faith in their spirituality, for asking these deeper questions and maybe even making like a really scary change. But they may be in a situation where they don't even want to like leave their family per se or do this. They're just unsure. How do they begin to walk this path without necessarily feeling like they're living a separate life or they're disconnecting from their life and maybe even connecting deeper with their life and their family?
It's a great question because I've been in relationships where I've left and I've been in relationships where I've left, but I've stayed. Just because I didn't want to leave again. I just thought, let me just figure it out. But there was still some separation within the relationship. So you can figure your stuff out without leaving. And so what I did in that one relationship where I just stayed, but I, was separated, I started to challenge myself every month. And I called it the out of the box challenge. And I did this because I wanted to do something for myself as a mother who was always, doting on her children. I wanted to do something for myself. And so every month I chose something new that I was curious about that might have taken me out of my comfort zone a little bit. And this is how I began to re-engage back in life again. Know who I was. What was I curious about? What was I good at? Because we lose knowing who we are when we're always nurturing and taking care of everybody else. We've got to find our way back to ourselves again. And it's not selfish. It's actually very, very important. So every month for a year, I did this. I call it my out of the box challenge. And I did things that I had never done before. I went to Toastmasters, which, I was terrified at the time of public speaking. So I thought, well, let's just jump right in. And I did that, and life squeezed me, and it was hard, and I was out of my comfort zone. But I got home that one night after speaking in front of, 6 people, and I felt so good about myself. And that's how you start. That's how I started getting back to loving myself again, because I had been so angry at myself for having this, whole family of mine break apart. So I had to regain self-love. I had to put anger at bay and find a place in my heart where I could recover that love for myself.
Yeah, it seems like it's both an inner space and an outer space. Like you also made time on your calendar. You made time in your heart and in your calendar. And I see this theme reflected through your work that it's the inner and the outer. We're working on both of these aspects. I'm thinking about a person right now as we're chatting who feels like they have a current job or role or how they spend most of their time to make money that they feel like is absolutely leading them to less quiet, more a hamster wheel, constant work and pressures, stress. What would you say to that person? Is it change gears, leave it? Is it how can we relate to that differently and find quiet in it? I just want to speak about this work aspect because it kind of dominates a big part of our Western culture. And I think it's a big source of people's struggles in some sense.
Well, yes. And a lot of this quiet that I'm talking about is a lot to do with the mind chatter. And is this job really serving me? And am I really where I want to be? And I think that's why our work is it's so perplexing at times because we're not sure if we fit in. We're not sure if we need to get out. We're not sure how to communicate to make our situation better. We're not even sure, Anthony, and I've been in really high level entrepreneurial masterminds. People don't even know why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
So we just start there, really. Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And what are my skill sets that come easy to me that I don't even know that I take for granted? But everyone else will be like, oh my God, you did such a great job. And you're just kind of like, yeah, well, that's just, it's no big deal. Well, your no big deal is something huge as somebody else. So in terms of getting quiet in our jobs, I think it's this quieting of the chatter of the mind, feeling unsettled, feeling like there's more for you. Like what I did in my previous career was I was a dental hygienist in my 20s and 30s, and I sat with over 40,000 patients one-on-one. And I didn't really know what I was doing other than I was just cleaning people's teeth and, helping them with their lives. And funny enough, I was able to kind of even intuit what their bodies and their energy field was, saying. And I just thought, well, this is just normal. I think every hygienist is able to do this after 20 years. And actually, it's not every hygienist. It was me. And so I would say in the last year of my career, what I did to stop the chatter of my mind was I just looked at what my skill set was. What was my personality while I was in that job, and how did it match with my purpose? Because when we can match our personality with our purpose, then we're unstoppable. So I noticed what I was doing and observing what I was doing. And I thought, okay, now I've got it. Now I understand my skill set and my gifts. They were truly my gifts. And when you own your gifts and you're not as scared of your gifts, your whole life changes. And that's what mine did. I exited that profession and now I'm a coach and I do energy work.
It reminds me of a quote that if you bring forth what is within you, it'll save you. If you don't, it will destroy you. I'm paraphrasing, but it seems that part of this who am I inquiry leads us to some version of an authentic self, at least in human expression, that has gifts and capacities, and that those must be utilized for the greater purpose, or there's going to be some kind of internal disharmony because it's not on the path. And if that's the case and you agree with that, then it seems like the disharmony itself is not the problem. It's a gift. It's like nudging you to look, to get quiet, to make the change. And then I guess if you accept that as the case, then it's all kind of like a perfect unfoldment. And perfect doesn't mean easy, beautiful, fun all the time, but it does mean connected and on a unfolding path that has a sense of higher power and deep, deep purpose beyond our minds. How does that sit with you?
You are speaking my language. I mean, when people come to me for, coaching and they say, I have a problem and I'm suffering. And I say back to them, well, what is the calling that you're not saying yes to? Because that's why it's showing up as pain in your body. It's showing up as a chronic disease. And I saw this with 40,000 patients, Anthony. Like I saw humanity not following their purpose, not knowing why they were in the jobs they were in. Of course, not everybody, but I'm just saying the people that were on the most medications, the people that were the most anxious, the most depressed, the most lost, were those people that hadn't said yes to their calling. And I saw it display in their health. I was also seeing it display in my own health. So, I mean, when we get quiet and we hear our soul's calling, our health gets so much better. Our lives get so much better. But we've got to tap into this calling and we've got to say yes to it. And there were so many times I walked that labyrinth and I heard, you're a healer. You are gonna help the masses. And I was like, I'm just sitting here as a single mom cleaning teeth. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, this is crazy talk 15 years ago. And then here I am because I actually listened to it. I got the calling, I accepted it, I trusted it. And it was like, hey, God's plan is better than mine.
Something that comes up for me as you say that is I think when you hear this calling or you have a sense of the inner voice, it feels like it can be like overwhelming in that initial state. Like you felt like a little you version of you. Like, I don't know if I'm worthy yet or if really for real. And I guess there's like a smallness that we feel as we step into our calling. And then as we get further down the path, it seems to me that the trap that many people fall into is wrapping their ego around what they do to build themselves up into another layer of an inauthentic self. And it now seems when you're getting bigger, it's like there's this pull to stay smaller, and smaller in this sense might just mean humble and connected to the root of what's driving you. It's not really you. It's like life, God, the unfolding happening through you. Does that feel right?
Yes, exactly. It's the vulnerability. It's the being humble that you have been chosen by God, by the universe, by your muse, call it whatever you want. When you get quiet, you get chosen for a certain task, and that's why we're here. And so to stay humble to that calling, to not deny it, to not push it away. I was denying my calling. And what happened to me was I was taking the groceries out of my car one day, and the lift gate in the back hadn't closed all the way. And I came running around the back to get the groceries out, and boom, literally right here, just boom, hit me over the head like a ton of bricks. And I was like, oh my God, am I bleeding? Like I almost fell down. Like it was crazy. And do you know that night, now I had been saying no to this calling. After I get hit over the head, that night, I literally started channeling in messages from the universe. I mean, nonstop. They did not stop. And I wrote everything down that I knew. And it's like I had to get hit over the head. And I don't want anyone else to get hit over the head. And I also, I'm a part of a community that works on a lot of innovative health products and services, as you know. And so many of them come to me, and they're very, very, very successful in their products and services. But so many of them come to me and say, I've got this black label that I haven't put out in the world yet because I'm afraid. I've got this solution, but it's kind of under the radar right now because I'm just not sure. I'm afraid. And that's the thing. It doesn't, you don't have to have a black label of whatever. Like you could be your own fear of what you have always known that you are called to do, but you just haven't taken the first steps. And the first step is really to say yes. Yes, okay, I'm in this, let's go.
A reflection that I have here is I'm thinking about our Fit Father and Fit Mother communities. There's probably a percentage of people, and maybe even a large one, that does have a sense of their calling or purpose, or from this conversation realizes that there's probably deeper levels to explore. There's many people who find us initially who probably feel so stuck and physically unhealthy and out of alignment with their behaviors, that the idea of the deeper purpose and inner calling work is yet to be revealed. You're just stuck in the mire. And I think it's powerful how, and I see it all the time, when people go through these physical healing journeys, they align their environment, they start eating healthier, expressing better habits, they have more commitment, discipline, and willpower, and they express those virtues. They get the body healthier and more energized in honoring it with the right kinds of foods, that these deeper levels of their self-awareness open up. And then from the physical healing, there ends up being layers of deeper healing and self-knowledge. Is that something that you've seen in your practice?
That's the very first step on the path, is nurturing our bodies. The spiritual practice starts in our bodies. It's just funny that way. We've got to, and the reason is this is all about energy. We have to remember we are energy. Everything is energy. And if someone feels stuck, it's because you have stuck energy going on. And so in the book, Get Quiet, the first path is to shift and shake your energy of your body. We've got to shake everything loose. We've got to shake loose what we're holding on to. Again, going back to what we first started, we are weighed down by habits, bad behavior, poor diets, unhealed trauma, not tapping into emotions, healing emotions. And all of this weighs heavy on us. And so we have to shake ourselves, literally shake our energy to start the process of being able to go inward to find this calling. So it always starts in your body, always starts in the body. And then it goes into shaking and clearing away your environment. And then it goes into shaking and clearing that mindset and all the chatter. Mm-hmm. And then it goes into resting and receiving all this new knowledge that's meant to come to you. And I say to the female clients that I have is, you've got to rest. I mean, you've got to find time to deeply rest and not just, and really give yourself permission. And I want you to know, whoever is listening, I give you permission to rest. We are living in a society where we have got to take care of our nervous system and the health of our nervous system in order to be healthy, in order to get to the soul's mission. So I find that after this path of rest, oh my God, that what you will receive, not only just in messages, but from the kindness of others, all of a sudden the dreams that you're having, that you want for yourself, that you think, wow, I think I could attain those. People will come into your world that you never expected, and the magic starts swirling because you have shifted this energy. And it's miraculous. It's just what makes life just amazing to me.
I think that's a message, and I'll speak for the men who are listening too. Like, man, I think a lot of guys feel like they're carrying so much in the idea of their role in just the energetic output. And what I think is amazing is many of us probably could use a pause and a deep rest and restoration. And I also think is amazing is in the process of doing this Get Quiet work, and I've certainly been on my version of this path for many years now, when you get more quiet, your capacity opens up because your nervous system is more regulated and you can handle more. That doesn't mean you don't need deep rest, but it does mean that your capacity goes up in the process. So ironically, by slowing down, you get more capacity to carry more into the future. But that can't be the intention of really slowing down. It just ends up being a byproduct. Does that resonate?
100%. It's like driving in a race car 100 miles an hour down the freeway and looking out the window. I mean, what are you going to see?
Yeah, not much. Blurs.
Instead of getting in a beautiful carriage ride, horse and carriage down, some beautiful London street and, soaking in the sights. And it's the same thing with your life. I mean, you've got to slow down and enjoy this. I mean, I've sat, Anthony, I started my career in hygiene in the 90s, where I was sitting with AIDS patients who were dying. I sat with vets who had lost limbs. I've sat with cancer patients who were in their last year of life. And I had one in particular named Jeff. I'll never forget. He said to me, I said, what'd you learn? What have you learned through this, Jeff? And he said, I just don't want people to wait to do what they really want to do. And that was, that was a message for me that day. And a lot of messages came in those years through patience. And that's the other thing too, is, we think the currency, the best currency is money, but really the best currency are messages from each other. And when we can truly, truly, deeply listen and be present to each conversation, you are going to find that when you bring out the best in that conversation in the other person, they're going to give you a message. We are here for each other, to give each other messages, to guide us, to ultimately guide us home.
And so what's so ironic about that is if you have the opposite of a quiet mind and being, and you're going through these same connections with your exact friends and family, but you're only half present, you're not really fully engaged, you're not bringing your full self to that. You're going through the same amount of like time, I guess you will, the same actions, but you're basically both giving and reaping a fraction, if not anything, from what you could through genuine connection. And it probably feels even heavier. So I could see people living the same exact life, but the actual feeling of the interfacing and the connection with every moment is so deep on one hand and so shallow and distracted on the other, but you're doing the same things. So it seems a really beautiful opportunity for us to show up with exactly what's in our life right now with real present connection.
100%. And even in the difficult moments in relationships. Now, the thing with relationships is that people only want the same thing. They all want to be seen. They all want to be heard. And they all want to be valued. And that's what I've learned from my patients and the hundreds of coaching clients I've had. We all want the same thing. And if you are giving somebody those three things, you're going to have the best relationships ever. But it's hard because we want to be the ones talking. We want to be the ones that are interesting. Well, what about just being interested?
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing on my spiritual walk that I've been, the word working on doesn't feel right, but I have an intention to cultivate is seeing God in all things and experiences. And so if I'm really feeling that way when I'm engaging with you, I'm engaging with the totality of all that is, the center of creation exploding forward as you and as me. And there's a divine quality to every moment. And that, what a way to live if that's a state of being and awareness that someone's called to have.
Well, that's what I feel that the divine masters called living heaven on earth. In the Hindu religion, that is the premise, is to live heaven on earth. How do we do that? And you just said it. It's how do we unify? How do I help humanity unify? I have to be feeling whole within myself first. And actually, that is the last chapter in Get Quiet, is the unification of humanity. And when we all find our soul's purpose and our soul's mission, we unify around that organizing principle. Mm-hmm. And right now, the world will tell you that, it's not unified, that it's very separate. And I want to say that it's not true. What you're being fed is not true. All humans want to unify. That is our nature, to be in community and to procreate and to support. That is our true nature. And so this is a fight for survival of humanity. And so getting quiet is just not a luxury, it's a necessity.
And I would say that unity does not mean sameness, because in the interconnected patterns of nature, we see complete uniqueness that all plays into a cohesive whole. And I think that's where we confuse things as a society many times. It's like if everyone is living out their true soul purpose in their unique gifts, it will be expressing in as many possible ways as you can imagine, yet at the same time be the same in its deep root and character of what it is, the expression of life in its unique way. and it will interconnect in this path of goodness and love. And this is kind of what I want to ask you and talk about next is, it seems like there is this root of unified love and oneness at the center of most major religions. Like, how has that become apparent to you based on how you were grown up in the faith that you have? I know you studied many religious traditions and spiritual traditions and have your own practices. Like, what do you speak about this unified love idea?
It's what brings us back to human kindness. There are so many humans on this planet who have a specific mission. And that is the beauty of humanity, is the innovations that come from that. The ideas, the creativity, the art. I mean, everything that's come from people's own individual expressions. And if we all just know that we're not separate, we don't all have to be the same, we don't all have to think the same, we all just need to realize we've got to get back to human kindness. And the way to do that is to respect and honor somebody's path and what they're creating, and allow them to have the freedom and not judge what they're creating because it doesn't align with you. No, allow them the freedom, just like you want to be allowed the freedom to create. And so when we connect to the center of ourselves, in that center of the labyrinth, I found the power to be my most authentic creative self. And I'm telling you, that is a feeling that I will hold forever in that moment. And in that moment, it was so funny to talk about synchronicities. I'm walking the labyrinth and I'm going and doing it along my prescriptive path that I had come up with. And I get to the center one day and I'm feeling all this love and this unity. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what I was meant. This is like the culmination of this work. And I looked down, Anthony, and I'm telling you, I couldn't believe my eyes. I will text the picture to you. It was a picture of it was a little outfit of a Wonder Woman outfit that some journeyman before me had left in the center. I'm like, you can't even make this stuff up. I'm feeling my power. And what's reflecting back at me of all days that I'm there, and I've walked this hundreds of times, is this Wonder Woman outfit reflecting back at me. And when you start having synchronicities like that in your life, you are in the flow of God's love, and your life will become so magical you won't even be able to recognize it.
I got chills as you shared that. And so beautiful. And I also I think all of us have, and probably more so the more we're on our paths, have had these signs and omens, and they're important things to recognize, and good little affirmations on our path and nudges and encouragements. And that is a very significant and beautiful one for you. And it reminds me of another place I want to take this conversation as we bring it towards the end, is this idea of thinking versus feeling, or logic versus intuition or knowing. And I think we can take those separately. The premise of my question, and maybe a little backdrop, is on my spiritual path, I definitely used to think that I needed to do a lot of thinking and logic to figure things out. And as I grew closer to my connection with God, I then started just knowing, trusting intuition, actually valuing feeling so much more than thinking, and even saying the word feeling more than thinking, like I think versus I would say maybe I feel. And they're both, I think, modes of operating, but it seems very clear our current culture is heavily on the thinking side. At least the masculine expressions of our culture are, and we value logic as in A plus B equals C, kind of like causality, which has utility. But then there's this whole realm of feeling and intuition, which seems to come up in all these spiritual traditions. Can you speak into this dichotomy of thinking and feeling, logic versus intuition?
It's a brilliant thing to think about. It's a brilliant idea to ponder. thinking, that's just in the mind. And we can't trust the mind. We cannot trust the mind because it will lead us astray based upon, any type of pre-programming we've had and domestication that we've had. We cannot trust the mind in the sense of reactivity that we could be feeling when some things are brought up. I mean, it's hard to trust the mind. That's why in coaching, the very first thing you learn is to have someone drop from their head to their heart. And in that moment where they drop from their overthinking mind into their heart, and I would say for me, my work is even dropping further into one's soul, because I feel like I'm a teacher of the soul, is for someone to be able to connect to the feeling of their heart and open their heart. And, when someone's gone through a tough time, a lot of our heart energies are closed. And so one of the paths in Get Quiet is how to open up that heart energy. And it is associated with getting the health of your environment, back. So, dropping from your head to your heart, and that emotional intelligence that we desperately need right now. That's how I feel about that subject is, and for men particularly, to be able to do that is not a weakness. It's a strength.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's become apparent in my journey for sure. Now, at this point, it's so funny because we've covered a lot of landscape, but at the same time, we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much here in all this to unpack. And my hope for someone still listening to this conversation at this point is that you have a couple things that were light bulbs in your mind and in your heart that you want to explore deeper, think about, create more space, and that you take this and you actually do some reflection and don't just have this be another conversation that adds more data into your mind, but is something that could be experiential and gets you to feel and become more quiet. And also, Elaine, you help people in a deeper way through your book, Get Quiet, which by the time this conversation is live, your book will also be available for purchase. So if someone is interested in going deeper in this stuff with you on these 7 simple paths to take this conversation, but then 10x it through this beautiful book that you've created, please tell us how they can get in contact with the book and with you and to explore this deeper.
Yes, well, they can find me at elaineglass.net. And I send out a weekly Sunday mornings beautiful email of inspiration that I actually speak, so you can hear my voice each Sunday morning and the message I have that day. And then you can find the book at getquiet.com. And if you order it, you're going to get 2 wonderful bonuses. You're going to get the first chapter to read, and you're also going to get a 6-minute guided meditation from me. That's just it's a beautiful way to start your week as well.
I've really enjoyed this, Elaine. I thank you for being here and creating this powerful conversation and this book. I've taken a lot from this, and we are both recording this on a Friday evening at a time when it's a little rainy in Arizona, which is rare. And I know both of us are excited to continue to enjoy some beautiful Get Quiet time the rest of this evening. And I want to end this with a moment of appreciation for you and the life journey that you've been on to get to this point. It is beautiful and inspiring for all of us, myself as one of your friends, to witness, because it shows that your flowering is the flowering of all of us. And it's so cool to see this come into service in such an explicit way, helping the world right now with a much needed message. So thank you, Elaine.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been just a delight to be with you.
Hey there, my friend. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Fit Mother Project podcast. If you love what you heard, I have a favor to ask you. Please consider taking 60 seconds right now to leave us a rating and review on our podcast. Leaving us a review is super quick. It only takes a minute, and it's so helpful to us as it really boosts this podcast to reach more people who need this information and this message. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, you can leave us a star rating and review. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit the like button and leave us a comment. Overall, I truly appreciate you being with us here on the podcast. On behalf of me and my entire Fit Mother Project team, we truly feel honored and grateful to support you and your family on your journey to fantastic health. I thank you for your support of this podcast and of this mission. Also, if you're interested in joining our Complete Fit Mother program and becoming an official member of our community, you can visit our website, fitmotherproject.com. And on the Fit Mother site, you'll be able to see our Complete Fit Mother program, along with our online store with the best supplements designed for busy moms. And you'll also find a ton of free resources like recipes, workouts, meal plans, and more. God bless you and your family. This is Dr. Anthony Balduzzi signing off. I'll catch you on the next episodes of the Fit Mother Project podcast.